Welcome back. I'm Papa Pete. We ended our last episode near Fort Mandan in North Dakota. That's where the Corps of Discovery spent the winter of 1804 to 1805. Lewis and Clark chose that spot because there were villages of friendly native tribes in the area, like the Mandan and Hidatsa. Those tribes often lived in permanent round dwellings known as earth lodges. In our last episode, I referred to earth lodges like this one at Knife River as hogans. Well, it turns out the Mandan and Hidatsa do not use that term. That term is used by the Navajo tribe in the southwest for a similar dwelling. In the tribes of the Great Plains, earth lodges were clustered closely together, like in this diorama from the museum back in St. Charles. You might recognize the fort in the upper left. Such villages were eventually abandoned. Over the years, the lodges collapsed and were grown over by vegetation, but in many cases you can still discern the outlines of the lodges. It's hard to see from ground level, but as you can see from this Google Maps image, they can be quite distinct from above. From Fort Mandan, the red triangle on this map, the Missouri zigzags north and west for many miles. A large portion of the river has been transformed by dams into a sprawling lake. Instead of going there, I hopped over to Theodore Roosevelt National Park. This park is mostly badlands, or at least the parts that I saw. To be clear, this is completely distinct and hundreds of miles away from Badlands National Park in South Dakota. But the landscape is similar. I got my first look from a rest stop on the interstate. Then I drove 30 miles on gravel roads to the site of one of Teddy Roosevelt's ranches. I passed a few oil wells and a few cows and quite a few gullies and hills and weird rock formations. Elkhorn Ranch was the second of two ranches owned by Roosevelt, built in 1884 on the banks of the Little Missouri River, a tributary of the Missouri. All that's left of the buildings are a few foundation stones. At one point, Roosevelt ran 4,500 head of cattle on the open range in the Badlands, but a severe cold winter in 1886 to 1887 killed 60% of his stock, and he eventually quit ranching. I was there in October, and it was already cold and windy. I can't imagine what it's like in the real winter. I spent the night in Williston, North Dakota, because I wanted to see an oil boom town. The real boom was 10 to 15 years ago when thousands of wells were drilled into a layer of oil shale called the Bakken Formation. For reference, the green smiley face is at Roosevelt's Ranch. I saw a few dozen wells on my drive from there to Williston. The industry is still active in Williston, maintaining the wells and pipelines and doing more drilling, if what I saw is any indication. Okay, enough of this 21st century stuff. Let's get back to 1805. Near Williston is the Missouri-Yellowstone Confluence Interpretive Center. The first thing you see is this oxbow next to the parking lot, and you have to make your way around the marsh and onto the muddy banks of the Missouri to actually see the Yellowstone River across the way. Here I'm pointing at the mouth of the Yellowstone. Lewis and Clark used this confluence as a rendezvous point both on their way west and on their return journey. Let's get a better look. First, we'll look downstream on the combined river, which makes a sharp bend to the right. Now we're looking upstream on the Yellowstone. And here we're looking upstream on the Missouri, which is bending off to the west. I followed on U.S. Route 2 into Montana. I had a few more glimpses of the Missouri, then the river turns to the southwest, with very limited road access for a few hundred miles. I continued west, stayed in the U.S., and spent the night in Havre. "60 miles southwest of Havre, Lewis and Clark came upon a tributary joining the Missouri from the right, which was a surprise. They were expecting tributaries only from the left. So they had to decide whether the river on the right was actually the Missouri and the river on the left was just another tributary, or vice versa, and they called this spot Decision Point. They correctly concluded the right fork was a tributary and named it Maria's River, in this photo obscured by the trees I'm pointing to. Let's see it from above. Maria's River is flowing from left to right. It joins the Missouri River along with a small oxbow. This is downstream on the combined rivers, which is to the northeast. Now we'll swing clockwise to look upstream on the Missouri to the southwest. Next stop was Fort Benton. This town was a steamboat port in the mid-19th century, making it the world's innermost port. Apparently, at one point, it was quite a colorful place, but it was very quiet the day I visited. Lewis and Clark knew for sure they picked the correct river when they finally arrived at the first set of waterfalls on the Missouri. I set off on this gravel road to see if I could find it too. A dam, now called Ryan Dam, was built over and around the first set of falls. It's a beautiful setting with a recreation area on this little island. It was already closed for the winter. Looking downstream, there's no place to pull their boats over, and they actually backtracked a few miles before starting their portage. It took 31 days for the Corps of Discovery to move their stuff over land and bypass all 6 waterfalls, which run along today's city of Great Falls. Our next episode will follow the Corps as they get back in the water and resume their upstream journey. Until then, so long from Papa Pete.